It is Friday, and it's another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Jack Johnson. We've got plenty of questions to answer in our mailbag segment, and I'm going to have a quick update on a new downtown stadium for the Kansas City Royals. That's all coming up next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. And you can find this podcast on wherever you get your podcasts. Download them on Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and you can always find us on YouTube as well. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If this is your first ever episode tuning in to Locked On Royals, of course, welcome in. We're always welcoming new listeners and new subscribers, but you're probably wondering who I am. Well, I'm probably just like you, a diehard Royals fan, and I would say the majority of my day involves covering and being around sports. I work here in Kansas City at Sports Radio 810 WHB. I've got a morning show on ESPN Kansas City, 10 to 11, Monday through Friday, and once a week, I've got a show on Sports Radio 810 WHB on Tuesday nights from 7 to 10. So you ever want to get my thoughts on things that don't always pertain to the Royals or involve the Royals, I certainly can touch in the NFL area, NBA, college sports, football, basketball. Really, there's nothing that we don't cover in those shows over there. But when you come here to the Locked On Podcast Network, and more specifically to Locked On Royals, we are going to be locked into 30 straight minutes of Kansas City Royals baseball talk, which I'm sure if you've clicked on this podcast, you know that by now. Now, today's show is brought to you by Jase Medical, and we'll have more coming up on them in about 10 minutes or so, but they make your life a lot less stressful because they take care of so much of what you need health-wise. And Jase Medical is always a proud sponsor here. We love talking about them, and we love to continue talking about them right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. But it is Friday. It's a Mailbag Friday. We've got plenty of questions to get into, so I'm not going to waste any more time. You all sent great questions. Some of you sent them through direct messaging. Some of you just replied to it on Twitter. I think moving forward, I'm going to try to do it on a couple of different social media platforms. Might try to do it on TikTok, might try to do it on Instagram as well. But here in the coming days, the coming weeks, we're really going to try to expand our social media outreach than just Twitter, because I feel like I could be alienating some fans that don't really get on Twitter that much and are just left to when this post on YouTube or on those podcasting links. So going to try to get even more questions as we progress through the offseason. But as I said, let's not waste any more time and get to some of these questions. The first one comes from Ben. One, how realistic is a Bobby Witt Jr. extension? And two, how many more 40-man spots will open up? I would say that right now, there has to be a clear message in the Royals front office that an extension for Bobby Witt Jr. is the top of the list. That's ahead of bullpen work. That's ahead of rotation work, a corner outfield bat. To me, it has to be pretty clear. You have to sign Bobby Witt Jr. to a long-term deal, because if you don't this offseason, you're looking at a guy that's going to have a breakout like maybe we haven't seen even yet from the superstar shortstop for Kansas City. I mean, he could bet on himself too. Bobby Witt Jr. could say, here's my price. If you can't meet it, well, I'm going to gamble on myself again. And if he really takes off, he's got an all-star to his list, an all-star nomination, I should say, a gold glove, maybe a silver slugger. He finishes top 5 in WAR. Then you're looking at a guy that maybe is out of your price range. But to me, he's who you build around. So I'm going to say it's definitely likely. I think the Royals understand that it is a priority this offseason, but it also comes down to Bobby Witt Jr. You know, does he want to stay in Kansas City his entire career? And if the Royals don't give him much help, that could be a reason he doesn't want to sign a long-term deal. He wants to play in the postseason. Every player does, but I would say that to me is a priority for both sides right now to get a long-term deal done. I think Bobby Witt Jr. loves Kansas City, but of course, playing in the postseason, showing a little bit extra effort and to have a nice cushy contract to go with it, those are all things that'll make it that much better. So I do think it's very realistic. How it looks, what it would look like, that I think I'd need to do more of a, breakdown financially. I would need to look at some other, young players and their contracts. I mean, I think the Diamondbacks did it perfectly with Corbin Carroll. He didn't really bet on himself. They got that done before the huge breakout season happened. So to me, that was the right way to go about it. But Bobby Witt Jr. is kind of already broken out. His price tag is going to be pretty high, but I do think it's very realistic the Royals get it done. Now, the other question you had was more 40-man roster spots that'll open up. But we know by the end of the year, you're going to have Brad Keller off the 40-man roster. You're going to have Zach Greinke off the 40-man roster. And I believe Taylor Clark as well, because that was a one-year deal when they brought him back to Kansas City. So there's 3 more spots I think that'll open up. Will be interesting to see if they keep guys like Jonathan Heasley, Jackson Kowar. Maybe in the future, Jordan Lyles could be moved. You've got a guy like Josh Stallman, who's still on the listed on the 60-day injured list. Josh Taylor, another guy. I mean, I could realistically say about 5 to 6, maybe even 7 more spots will be opened up as we progress here in the coming weeks. Once the season officially wraps up with the World Series concluding, I believe that will be at the tail end of next week. It's right before November 1st. So I'm sure we will see this thing wrap up in the early days of November. And then those guys will be, free agents at that point, and they'll have a little bit more of a clearer picture of their 40-man roster. But to me, I could see about 5 to 6, 7 more guys being taken off of it. I do think John Heasley is going to be removed. I do think that, it's a good chance that Max Castillo could be removed from the 40-man roster. Still might clear waivers there. It would not shock me if Jackson Kowar is taken off the 40-man roster. It also wouldn't shock me if Josh Stallman and Josh Taylor as well were 40-man roster casualties. But good question there from Ben. Matt asks, he's got 2 questions here from the same topic. One, would you sign him if he's a GM? And he's talking about Trevor Bauer here. And number 2, will the Royals think about it and or do it? No one thought they'd sign Aroldis Chapman after all. Well, the last thing you said there is absolutely true. I never envisioned the Royals signing Aroldis Chapman at any point in his career, not even in 2015, when he would have been still in Cincinnati, like trying to add to the bullpen. Never thought that would be likely. And I even thought it was less likely when New York sent him home at the end of the 2022 season. I was like, there's nothing left in the tank there. He can't throw strikes. He doesn't throw hard. He's always hurt. And he's also a problem off the field. So I think at this point, with J.J. Piccolo being the president of baseball operations and the acting GM of this team, it is a little bit different than with Dayton Moore. Because I think if Dayton Moore was still the president of baseball operations and the GM, I don't think he makes a signing like Aroldis Chapman. So I'm going to say the Royals could contact him if, again, everything is proven that he's innocent. I know there was the long video he posted on Twitter, all the detail, and it's definitely an ongoing story now. I don't think his career is done at all. He was really good over in Japan. If he clears it and all of it comes out that this was all made up and it's confirmed it was all made up, and I need to do a little bit more digging on those details anyway, but he's going to come back to Major League Baseball. I don't think he's going to go back to a West Coast team like the Dodgers, because the Dodgers kind of forced him out anyway from this whole ordeal. They're the ones who suspended him, and then he never got that suspension lifted, and then his career was basically over at that point. But now there is going to be talk of what happens when he is eligible to sign with any team again. And I still think there's something in the tank there. It's going to be an adjustment, though, coming back over from Japan to the big leagues. But I guess to answer your question here on would I sign him if he was GM, with the accusations being proven false, I think for the right price, yes. Because this feels even different than the Aroldis Chapman situation, because the Aroldis Chapman situation, it happened and he still was pitching in the big leagues. I believe looking back, there might have been a little bit of a suspension there. But, the Royals at this point, I think if they can give a guy a second chance, I'm not going to put it past them. I think it is likely. If I were the GM, you need to add to the rotation. I think if it was a 1-year deal and you could flip him for prospects at the deadline, it makes sense from a baseball standpoint. So, yeah, to answer your first question, I would. And number 2, the Royals think about it and do it. I have no reason to doubt that they haven't had conversations about it. I'm sure that every team right now in baseball is kind of wondering, are we going to be the team to give him a chance? Maybe Trevor Bauer would want that as well. Maybe he'd want to go to a place that, is not going to be as highly exposed to the media like LA would be, like New York would be. Maybe he wants to, just get back into the league. Whoever gives him a deal, is going to be the team he goes to. So something to gauge there. I'm very interested once we really hit the middle of the offseason, who is going to give Trevor Bauer another chance. And maybe nobody wants to give Trevor Bauer a chance, but I'm sure the Royals, after signing Aroldis Chapman, I wouldn't put it past them, is all I'm going to say here. All right, there's still plenty of questions to get into, so don't worry. It wasn't a 2-question Mailbag Friday. We got about 5 or 6 more questions to get into, and we're going to save that for the next segment coming up here on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I am your host, Jack Johnson. You can follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. We want to give a shout out to the title sponsor today in Jase Medical. I know that with Jase Medical, I really don't have to worry too much about things that aren't involved with my house. I don't need to worry about, I certainly need to worry about things like that. But when you have so much on your plate, you need to make payments, whether it's house payments, it's car payments, it's credit card payments. There's a laundry list of things you can. Well, one thing that I don't really have to worry about is dealing with medical care. And Jase Medical really takes care of all of that. And we're always proud to give them some love right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And with Jase Medical, modern medical care and treatment are important, but our global supply chains are fragile. Things like pandemics, natural disasters, and foreign travel may cut you off from the treatment that you need. Jase Medical is your solution. Just fill out their online form, and one of Jase Medical's board-certified physicians will review it to determine whether medications are safe and appropriate. Then Jase will send your prescriptions to one of their partner pharmacies, where your order will be filled and mailed directly to your home. You can also send your physician a message for answers to treatment-related questions anytime. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase case. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical Plus, an additional $20 off by using my code LOCKEDON at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's JASEmedical.com. And, it's just important to be sure that your loved ones or yourself are taken care of. So I strongly urge you after this podcast to go and check out Jase Medical on their website at jasemedical.com. We got more questions to answer from this Mailbag Friday segment, so let's dive right back into it. JT on Twitter asks, what starters get traded? He believes it's going to be MJ Melendez. I wouldn't put it past the Royals to go out there and trade somebody like MJ Melendez, but I think they are buying into what he did in the second half, and I don't think they're ready to move on from MJ unless a considerable return was given to them. And I think it had to be on the starting pitching side of things. I'm sure the Giants would love a player like MJ Melendez. They've got some pitchers that have been blocked at the big league level. You could try to get some help, a number 4 starter, number 5 starter. I wouldn't, again, like we said with Trevor Bauer, I wouldn't put it past the Royals because when they've talked about extensions before, MJ's name doesn't really come up. So to, kind of piggyback on what you said, JT, that's not a bad pick. I don't think it would happen, but I'm also not going to be shocked is what I would say to that. A starter that makes sense to get traded, it would not surprise me if Kyle Isbell is flipped because you have Drew Waters, and Drew Waters could play center field. I know that they love Kyle Isbell's defense, but that could be valuable as a 4th outfielder somewhere else. The Giants are a team that just keeps popping into my mind a little bit. Of course, they just hired Bob Melvin. Maybe they want some better defense out there in the outfield. So if I had to pick one player there, it feels likely that Kyle Isbell would be that guy. I don't think they move on from anybody in the infield. Not Vinny, not Michael Massey, not Bobby Wood Jr., of course, not Maikel Garcia. Salvador Perez, you could throw that name in a hat here and see what happens. But again, I just don't know if he's got a lot of trade value after the year that he just went through in 2023. So my pick is going to be Kyle Isbell. SNKC asks, could we see a Chapman-like career revival from any other pitchers in free agency? Looking at the free agent market, I would say, the name that keeps popping up to me is Ryan Stanek, though Ryan Stanek wasn't bad in Houston, but I remember him being really lights out in Tampa Bay. So that's probably not so much of a career revival. One that was brought up to me on Twitter, which I thought was very interesting, was Matt Barnes. Matt Barnes had a really good 2021 with Boston, wasn't good in 2022, wasn't good this year. Used to throw incredibly hard. Velo's not really there anymore, but he's using more of the curveball, using that as his first pitch, his first offering, kind of working backwards in counts. So I could see that. That would not be a bad career revival. I don't think we'll see it on the level that we saw with Chapman because Chapman went from sitting 96, 97 back up to 101, 102, 103, and 104. Like, I don't know if we can see that type of turnaround, but seeing if the Royals did it with Chapman, or at least scouted that he could have a bounce back year like that, I think there's going to be some guys out there the Royals look to try and fix and add to that bullpen. So that's going to be very interesting. But I also would keep in mind current Royals players that could have pretty good bounce back years. Colin Snyder and Dylan Coleman, and maybe even Josh Staumont come to mind of guys that are already on your 40-man roster. RB Carr asked on Twitter, with the Marlins GM out in Miami, are the White Sox the only realistic trade partner for Salvador Perez? It's been so quiet on that front, and I don't really know if the White Sox are still a realistic trade play. I don't see that destination being likely, because I don't think the Royals want to see Salvador Perez a double-digit amount of times if they ever were to trade him. If they trade Salvador Perez, I don't think they want to play him. Now, I think for his fit, you got a lot of Royals influence in that organization. Pedro Grifol is still there. I'm sure Salvi would love playing in Chicago just with the connections that he would have, but I don't think the Royals would want to do that. It would have to be a pretty significant return, and the White Sox would have to pay a large chunk of the contract, because the Royals want to send him there and not have to pay basically his whole contract. But then it gets difficult, because you're not going to get that big of a return prospect-wise if you aren't paying a big chunk of that contract. And I mean, just kind of say it out loud. Do the Royals are going to pay a lot of money to play against Salvador Perez, 10, 11 times a year? That just seems unlikely to me, especially with a team like the White Sox, who you could definitely consider your number one rival, just fan base wise in the division. Both teams not very good. Not sure you want to go give your future franchise Hall of Famer a chance to beat you every single time that you play him. So to me, I don't think they're that realistic. The White Sox, I think, want him. I just don't see it's that realistic. Miami still could be that outlet, just because I think with that opening in the front office, they might still try to go and get Salvador Perez. But until I hear more rumblings and I see more smoke, I'm just not going to buy into it too much right now. Primetime KC asks, outside of Reagans and Singer, who do you think is trustworthy in the rotation? I'm sorry to say it, those are the only two guys I can trust in the rotation right now. And Singer, I can't really trust. And Cole Reagans, as good as he was, I can't say it's going to be the exact same guy next year. I mean, he's not pitched a full season in the big leagues before. Really, there's no surefire bet, I think, in the rotation. Reagans, of course, would be the leading candidate. Brady Singer has shown in a full level of Major League Baseball, or a full season of Major League Baseball, that he can do it. So, yeah, I'd rank those guys 1 and 2. There's nobody else you can trust in the rotation right now. It'll have to be outside help. It'll have to be a free agent, and it'll have to be a trade, because right now there just isn't anybody in the rotation other than those two I really get that excited about. Alec Marsh a little bit, but he's still so young, and the numbers didn't really support him. I can't say that he's somebody I fully trust right now. So, yeah, I'm going to leave it at 2 guys in Cole Reagans and Brady Singer. Taco Salazar asked on Twitter, how much better is the Royals rotation if they add Trevor Bauer? I'm so curious, because we've already brought up Trevor Bauer a couple times today. I'm so curious what he will look like when he returns to the States, or when he starts pitching in big league ball again. And not to say that the Pone League or just pitching over in Japan is not a lot of talent. There's a lot of talent over there. It's not comparable to the big leagues. It's not like Major League Baseball. I mean, I still think there's something in the tank. I don't think we get Cy Young version of Trevor Bauer, the Trevor Bauer that got the big time deal with the LA Dodgers. I don't see that, but it does make this rotation better. A move for Trevor Bauer, making him your number 3 guy, your number 4 guy, I think it does make this rotation better, because you look at who was out there as the number 3, number 4, number 5 starter. He would be better than Jordan Lyles. He would be better than Zach Greinke, and he would be better than the opener and Alec Marshall. I feel pretty strongly with that answer to that question. And lastly, Kevin asks, after Thompson and Hearn moves, who else do you see getting DFA'd or non-tendered before the non-trade deadline, or the non-tender deadline? Excuse me, got my words all stumbled over there. I would say that I'm just remain with my answers from the first question today. I think Josh Taylor is an option. Josh Staumont would be an option. I think that Jackson Kowar is a pretty good option here. I think John Heasley, again, is another option. Taylor Clark is already going to be gone. Zach Greinke is going to be gone. Brad Keller is going to be gone. Max Castillo, another one I would throw out there. You could probably take Jake Brentz off your 40-man roster and him clear waivers. He hasn't pitched since 2000 and 22, the very beginning, I think he would clear waivers and be just fine. So I think for right now, those are my candidates pitching wise. And then you look at the rest of the roster. I mean, Matt Duffy's going to be gone. I think I said Taylor Clark is going to be a free agent. I think he's got another year of control. So if the Royals wanted to keep him, they could. But I would probably put him as a non-tender candidate. Nate Eaton is another name that comes to mind, but that's probably about it. I think those are the guys the Royals would move on from. And I'll throw in one last one. How about Edward Olivares? So those are all the names I think that are going to be in consideration for being non-tendered or just let go, DFA'd, or picked up off waivers by other teams. But I appreciate all the questions that were sent my way. Those are all great questions. And next Friday, we'll do the exact same thing with our Mailbag Friday segment. Okay, before we wrap things up, I want to get a little bit of an update on what's happening with the Royals stadium talks. There was a high number thrown, $4 to $6 billion in moving the stadium downtown, and the Royals came out and refuted that today. So what do I think? Well, I'll tell you next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can always follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we go any further, let's give a shout out to the other title sponsor today in Ibotta. Turkey is great, but we all know the best part of Thanksgiving dinner is the sides. With Ibotta, you can make sure you get the whole family's favorite side dishes and the turkey, all while getting yourself cash back. Starting November 1st for the fourth year in a row, Ibotta is giving 100% cash back on your Thanksgiving feast. Download the Ibotta app today and use code MLB to get 100% cash back on your Thanksgiving dinner starting November 1st. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and use code MLB. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code MLB. Well, there just has been so much controversy over a downtown stadium, whether fans want it, if you feel nostalgic about Kauffman, maybe you just don't want the location where they're pitching it downtown. Maybe you're not a fan of John Sherman. Maybe you are. But I think at the end of the day, we all know the positive side and the negative side of openly discussing it. Well, one thing I've been a little bit ticked off about is that we've been given deadlines, we've been given promises, and at the end of the day, we don't really feel like we're any closer. Well, earlier in the week, it was floated out that it would cost somewhere between $4 and $6 billion in total for this downtown stadium, and the price was much higher than the Royals ever let on, and they were trying to leak information, and I'm going, $4 to $6 billion just seems a bit high. I mean, even if the Royals were building the state-of-the-art downtown stadium, that still feels a bit high. If I'm not mistaken, and I'm not a financial guru or anything, but I'm pretty sure that SoFi Stadium for the Chargers is like $5 billion. And that's a place that can, hold a Super Bowl. So why would the Royals arguably be worth more, or the stadium be worth more, cost more, stuff like that? It didn't add up to me, is what I'm trying to get at here. And the Royals did put out a post, and I'm going to read it here for the podcast in case you missed it on Twitter. But this came out about 3 hours or so from when I'm recording this podcast at the moment. And they said the suggestion that a new stadium for the Kansas City Royals would cost Jackson County taxpayers $4.4 billion to $6.4 billion is erroneous, misleading, and inconsistent with what we've shared publicly and in private negotiations. Together with the Chiefs, we have been clear in asking for an extension of the existing Jackson County 3/8 cents sales tax. For the Royals, this would result in an approximate $350 million upfront contribution from the county toward the estimated $1 billion construction cost of the stadium. Private investment from the Royals alongside other public funds will also pay for the stadium and an associated infrastructure. Additionally, the Royals would cover the cost overruns to the stadium, as well as the proposed $1 billion surrounding district to generate year-round, long-lasting economic output and other benefits from the county, city, and region. Kansas City is on the rise. A successful public-private partnership is critical to secure the future of the Royals and the Chiefs for decades to come. This is kind of the tough part about downtown stadium talks. Because remember, way back, I say way back, it was probably August, when the Royals wanted to give a deadline and what it looks like. And the fan comments what I get on this podcast page, what I see on Twitter, what I see on social media, what I just see in the public, what I hear in the public is you have fans that go, we don't care about a downtown stadium. We want a competitive team, right? We want you to put money on the field and not worry about a shiny new downtown stadium. You feel like there's nothing wrong with Kauffman Stadium. You don't want to move the team. I've seen that side of it. But also it's so tricky and it's so difficult because the people who will be voting for a downtown stadium are not the ones that care about, the Royals on the field. Some do. I'm not saying everybody here, but it's not usually the fans that are in an outrage over this. And I think that from my point of view, I do see positives of a downtown stadium, just from a fan experience point of view. If I am going to a baseball game, now I'm somebody that can sit there, innings 1 through 9, but that's just me, right? If you're just a diehard baseball fan, you can do that. It's not hard. You're not going out to the plaza area, the concourse level, and going to the little cave. Maybe if you have kids, you do, but if you're just going there to watch the game, you're not spending much time out there. But when I've gone with other people, that's where it changes. How do I get more people to the game if the team is not a World Series contender? You see, to bring up a rival, the St. Louis Cardinals. I've never been to Busch Stadium, but I've heard about the ballpark district around there. The Cardinals have always been very consistent, very good, with the exception of this year. They fill the games all the time. There's no problems there. Because even if you aren't a huge baseball fan, there's stuff to do. Maybe the Cardinals get blown out and you leave the game in the 4th inning. There's stuff to do out there, but it still keeps people around the area spending money. So I see that financial uprise for it. I see the reason for it. I'm also, on the side of, if you do want support from the fan base, if you do want people to back up what you're trying to do, being very transparent is important. You got to be transparent in things like this. You've got to let the public know when these deadlines are going to happen, where you are going to be moving to. We've seen renderings. We've seen locations of where they could pop up. But I would say the average fan goes, listen, that's so far away. I don't care about that. I care about building a winning team. And if you bought this team and you want to spend money, you want to change the ways, that's what I think John Sherman has struggled to do. They took over the team in the middle of a rebuild, and you have to rebuild again. So it's kind of in rebuild 2.0. And if you're not spending money on the team, because we saw Texas spend a lot of money. We've seen, teams like, I don't want to say Arizona, they didn't spend that much money, but, the big market teams, they're going to always spend the money. Philly, the Mets, and the Yankees, the Red Sox, they're always going to be spending a lot of money. West Coast teams, Padres, Dodgers, but you want to see a small market team be a little bit more aggressive than the Royals are right now. So when you're talking about a downtown stadium, it's like, well, that would be cool, right? That'd be cool. That'd be awesome to see. I would still attend the games. It's not an issue for me. Maybe you're worried about parking. I'm sure they'd have a subway, not a subway, a car system, a train system to get to the game. I'm not really too concerned about that. But when I see this keep popping up, I almost just don't even read that much into it anymore, because if we're going in circles about this, right? We see the Royals put out a statement, and then everybody gets mad about it, and then it's kind of quiet for a while, and you're going, when are we getting official word on this? The voting's not going to happen for a couple of months, so I get that part of it. But just in being transparent, feels like there's faulty information that's put out, and the Royals have to refute that and say it's not true. Then you have a long statement. They feel like there's been like 4 to 5 statements made on their Twitter page or Facebook page or Instagram page. It's like at some point, you're dragging along people too much with this. It's so confusing. Even me, I'm not fully immersed into this. I could read the statement and go, okay, I know what the majority of that is saying. There's also a lot of big words that are thrown at you, and you go, I don't know what that even means. Well, just tell me yes or no, we moving downtown, and tell me what it's going to cost, what it's going to look like, stuff like that. And that's why I just think the Royals have screwed up more than a handful of times in this, and having untimely statements put out there. You've got, stuff being tarnished. And when I mean tarnished, I mean your reputation, the organization as a whole. I mean, you're already losing games. That hurts enough. And then you have, a billionaire owner that is worried about that. And think about it, on the surface, what it looks like. Even if you're not truly invested in this, you see a billionaire owner and he goes, I want to move the team downtown. A lot of fans are going, well, build a winner first. And I know it's years down the road. So it's like maybe in the game plan here, it is to build a winner eventually. And so there are a good baseball team when they move downtown, or if they move downtown. But to me, it's like you're not being transparent enough. And then to a fan that you're trying to get support from, you're going, okay, well, the team just lost 106 games and you didn't spend any money. So why are we focused on this and not the now? We're focused on the future, way down the road of stuff you maybe can't control in the immediate. We want to see a team just be cost effective now. You want to see a successful team now. You want to see that money that's being constantly put into this, into a team on the field. So I can get why there's not a lot of support right now. I just think, to sum it up here as best as I can, I think the Royals have just been stumbling with this. Oh, it's not been a smooth transition, and maybe it never was going to be smooth. I just think you got to be more transparent. You can't be having to refute this and get people all up in arms and then want to support it, not want to support it. You got to be transparent. I know things like that can be tough, but you can do a little bit better than this. Okay, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson, and you can always follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. And download this podcast on wherever you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, and on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. You have a great weekend, Kansas City. Enjoy the World Series. Enjoy football, college, and NFL. And we will talk to you again on Monday.